All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We're just a minute away from the 1 o'clock Eastern start time, so we'll give the audience just a minute to get started. And thank you for all of you that have already logged in. I see there's a few of you that are early birds, which is always well received. And you might find on your control panel we have our webinar chat enabled. And so while we wait for others to join, we wanted to invite you to connect with Scott and I over LinkedIn, but also please drop your LinkedIn URL. Let's make this an opportunity to get to know one another as best we can. So please go ahead and drop your LinkedIn, URL, perhaps where you're from. Would be great for you all to introduce yourselves to us as well. We'll make this as interactive of a webinar as we possibly can. Scott, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
This is actually, I think, the second webinar, Scott. You and I have maybe the third webinar. I can't remember that we've kind of tag teamed on. So it's always
At
nice
least
to yeah. And then it tends to be around AI, at least the past two. So certainly a lot to cover. Excited to partner with you on this one.
Likewise.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sue, for joining. Hi, Dana. Thanks for dropping in your URL. Feel free to connect with all of us. And while the attendees are logging in, I can see the number growing as I talk here. We want to take the time to just thank you all for joining our webinar today entitled AI's Reality Check Vendors Bring Hype to a Market Hungry for Solutions. My name is Alex Baranpuria. I'll be the co-pilot for today, but more so just sort of the voice of the audience. I'm co-founder of Ivy Exec, but I love to moderate webinars. So this is something that I definitely have a strong interest and passion in, and I'm really happy to be joined by my very good friend, Scott Swigart from Shapiro and Raj. He serves as the SVP of AI Innovation and Technology there. And in today's presentation, Scott is going to help us dive deeper into what are real world struggles, and those struggles are certainly ones that I feel as an organizational leader. But what are these real world struggles that organizations face when it comes to AI adoption? And our insights and information that we're presenting today is coming through a series of in-depth interviews conducted with Ivy Exec's own expert network, conducted by Scott and his team at Shapiro and Raj. So we hope that the insights are current, they're interesting, and that the findings are something that you not only feel resonate with you, but could be perhaps passed along to your organization even more broadly. So today we'll be focused on, helping AI solutions providers, particularly, gain a better appreciation for the perspective of the AI buyer. I'm sure there's many of you that are in the room that represent sort of the solutions provider category, potentially those that are buyers of AI solutions and those that are looking to just learn a little bit more broadly about where we are present day. And so, we really want to dive particularly into how the decision makers are navigating what we'll describe as the AI conundrum. Organizations are investing in AI, of course, but given the pace in which the AI technology is evolving, are companies actually able to keep up with the fast-paced nature of AI technology revolution and evolution? And so Scott will certainly cover that and more. We want to make our webinars interactive as possible. So please do, if you haven't already, drop your LinkedIn profile. Let's connect. Please share your comments, your thoughts. We will certainly find time throughout the duration of our time together for us to answer questions that come from you, but also comments and thoughts that you have on the discussion topics that we're going to cover today. So with that, Scott, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you to get started, and we'll go from there.
All right, sounds great. Thanks for the warm introduction, Alex. And what we're going to spend the next hour or so on is really building a little empathy for the AI buyer, pity the AI buyer in today's world. So first of all, it's worth mentioning just the whirlwind they find themselves in. So on one hand, AI is just very rapidly evolving. The companies launching the frontier models are constantly releasing, new capabilities and new features. There's a huge ecosystem of startups and established enterprise vendors built up around these. and the buyer just finds himself inundated, just absolutely inundated with things that they could look at that could potentially be of value. And so to examine this a little bit more deeply, we went out and talked to 10 decision makers, 10 people who are evaluating and choosing and implementing AI solutions for their organization, talked to people across a range of industries, and we kept them on the phone for an hour. And we explored some of these things that we just talked about, the swift evolution of AI, inbox, overload, hype versus impact turns out to be a big thing that came up in a lot of these interviews. And then there's always the build versus buy dilemma, but there are some interesting twists when it comes to AI that make this build versus buy decision a little bit different than what we've run into in the past. So first of all, palpable excitement. Everybody knows that this is a transformational technology. Everybody knows that we're on the leading edge of something at least as big as the internet, at least as big as mobile devices. And so there's a lot of excitement about where this is going to go and what it's going to enable, and a lot of pressure to get moving and get off the sidelines. So some people think this is going to be the biggest transformation to humanity ever, maybe even more than electricity. So time will tell, but I think we all feel like this is going to be big. So last time I was this excited was when the personal computer came out. This is going to be transformational. Overall, AI promises to tackle challenges that were previously difficult or expensive to solve, or maybe even impossible to solve. There's a class of problems that the latest large language models take from basically being impossible to trivial. And so there's a lot of excitement around that. And economically, this is expected to just compound at a rapid annual rate into an enormous market. And the other thing that we're seeing about this that's a little unique is just how quickly AI is being adopted, how quickly AI features are showing up in products that we use, how every organization, it seems like, has AI at the top of their strategy. And a little over a year and a half in, we're already starting to see the fruits of this as we look around. If you use Microsoft technology, you're seeing Copilot roll out. You're seeing Google do similar things, embedding AI in the Google Workspace products you use. And so we're just seeing this come to market fairly quickly. So, there's definitely a certain amount of the phrase awe comes to mind, which means both sort of wonder and terror. And there's a little bit of that. People are thinking about how this may impact the job market. And, with all this investment, when all this money gets thrown at solutions, it's a tiny fraction that end up kind of remaining standing in their current form. So I think everybody also expects there's just going to be tremendous churn in this marketplace in terms of solutions. For people who are old enough to remember the dot-com bust, I mean, venture money flooded into every dot-com internet company. And then, there was sort of a reckoning that wiped most of them out, but left a number of companies standing that are household names today. And AI feels like it's going to, follow a similar trajectory. And we're just on the leading edge. I mean, the technologies we're using the worst versions of them we'll ever have. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, says we're going to look back on ChatGPT-4 and feel like it was pretty lame. Google coming out with Gemini 1.5 Ultra and their latest one, significant step change over what came before. Anthropic Claude another very popular AI, the difference between version 2 and version 3 were, relatively large, and there's no real sense that this is plateauing in any way. It's really, we're just on the the bottom curve of the hockey stick. So when we talk to organizations, the question is, what does this mean for them? What does this mean in terms of companies that are adopting AI? And what we see is initially companies may take a little bit of a wait and see approach. They may just be culturally averse to change. They may not really see exactly what's in it for them. They hear the hype, and they sit on the sidelines. Then you end up with kind of cautious exploration. They're dipping their toe in the water. Maybe this is happening because employees are going rogue a little bit and finding use cases, using it on the side, or the company's opening it up a little bit and has done a little bit of AI governance, and so it's being a little prescriptive, telling people, okay, you can use Copilot. We're not really going to tell you how. We're not going to be very structured about it, but we're gonna open it up for some exploration. Then a lot of times what happens is the company starts to put a little bit of rigor around it, and they intentionally start piloting some things, some bigger initiatives. Maybe they're looking at using some kind of AI-enabled customer service product, or they're looking at AI as part of their marketing automation, or they're looking at AI as part of code development, or things like this, things that have settled out as relatively common and safe use cases. And so they'll put some pilots around these things, maybe decide, some measurements, some KPIs that they're going to do so that they can judge the success of these. Often the technology works, in one way or another. Maybe not every pilot, maybe not every foray is successful, but often there are some initial wins. And then they take stock of those, they take stock of the lessons learned, and then they move on to really thinking about a strategy, an organization-wide strategy about how AI is going to impact, most, if not all, parts of the business. And so just about any company you think of is somewhere along this spectrum. Most are somewhere in the pilot, and left of that. A few are to the right of that, and they've got some of those initial wins. Almost nobody's really at the comprehensive strategy stage. And the other things too that are sort of slowing people down is, how do you even know what to look at? I mean, again, people are completely inundated. There's something new every day. A lot of stuff that people look at isn't that great. And so you've looked at 2 or 3 things that demo well, but when you actually try them in your environment or you try them in real data, they just completely fall apart. There's a lot of trustworthiness around this. If I have to go check its work on everything that it does, is it really saving me a lot of time? If I can't trust it, if I run into hallucinations, now a lot of trust has been eroded. And so there's just a lot of initial buyers feeling kind of burned and feeling like it's a real gold rush mentality out there among vendors. And, they just don't have time. There's no way they could look at every potential solution that might possibly be valuable. The claims are all extremely, hyperbolic. And so to some degree they're looking at different mechanisms, different kind of proof that something is worth looking at.
Scott, if I may ask a question as you sort of reflect
Yeah.
on the conversations that you had in the interviews, do you have a sense from these organizational leaders that are buyers of AI solutions, whether it be early stage growth startup or more of an enterprise level of a purchase, if you will, are companies looking for good or good enough or great? Are the expectations too high for sort of some of the feedback and challenges that you've heard from buyers?
Yeah, I don't feel like the expectations are honestly that high.
Ah, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I feel like people who have played around with ChatGPT or things like that have some fairly basic expectations. I'm trying to write
Mm,
sales emails. This should
mm,
help me write emails that are at least a little better, or get to emails that are as good as what I'm writing faster, than I'm
mm,
able to do it. Or this should help me
mm,
rewrite this paragraph better. Or this customer service solution should, if it hears what the customer is complaining about, it should surface
mm,
things that are likely problems. So I think, people are looking for low-hanging fruit. They're looking for quick wins. And a lot
mm,
of times the solutions aren't even, matching up with those. It's like I said, as soon as people try it with it demos very well, the demo has been very carefully constructed and everything has been
mm,
honed so that this demo works. But when they go outside of that and they try using their data, um,
right.
and using it in their environment, it's a lot of the stuff is just terrible. It's
Mm,
worse than nothing.
mm,
And
mm,
so, and they rightfully assume, okay, not everything out there can be this bad. But how do you find it? How do you find the stuff that's good versus not good when there's
mm, mm,
just so much noise?
mm,
Um,
mm,
and
mm,
so many different solutions, competing for your attention. So I don't think I think people are pretty understanding that we're in early days of this technology and
mm,
they don't have, these grandiose, I'm expecting Jarvis from the Avengers and it should read my mind and,
right.
automate everything. And I don't encounter that. It's just, I know enough about AI to know this kind of ought to be possible. And I'm not necessarily seeing solutions that live up to it.
Mm, mm, mm. Very interesting.
So, so taking a look at this, this leads to some different ways to uh, effectively engage with buyers. And because they can't sit on the sidelines, right? No organization can say, well, we're just going to wait a couple of years. We're going to see how all this AI stuff shakes out. We're going to wait for the dust to settle. So they are under a lot of pressure to start to implement AI. But again, finding good solutions is non-trivial, and you can invest a lot of time and spend a few weeks, a few months going down the path with a solution just to find out that it's not going to work out. And that's really the tension that these buyers are sitting with. A lot of the reason for them being disappointed with the solutions is it's pretty obvious that a lot of stuff have just been rushed to market. That
Mm,
when AI came out, one company may come out with AI features as part of their solution. Their competitors felt like they had to rush stuff out. Companies that weren't doing anything with AI were getting a lot of bad press and were, being accused of being late. And so, companies were just hastily putting things together and putting them out there just to show that they're taking it seriously and they're relevant in this space and they're not falling behind. But a lot of those initial solutions they just weren't good. They just weren't baked enough. And I'm not going to name any particular vendors, but there are
mm,
vendors that have a reputation for um, doing quite good software development, and generally when they release stuff, it's pretty well baked. And people would look at maybe the AI solution that came out of them and say, this is the worst product this company has ever shipped.
mm,
It's embarrassingly bad. And so that also, again, has changed the buyer who has
mm,
experienced this and their willingness to try again and jump onto the next thing that lands in their inbox.
mm,
Um, a lot of it too is not very personalized at the buyer, so they're encountering a lot of generic claims that don't really take into account, that don't show any knowledge of them, any knowledge of the organization. The claims tend to be very feature focused, not like business solution focused. So a lot of it is our product can do X, our product can do Y, not speaking to a specific business challenge. And it's all just about AI front and center. We have an AI feature that does this. And at the end of the day, that might have been interesting 6 months ago. At the end of the day, I don't know that people care as much whether it's AI enabled as much as, because everybody's saying everything AI is AI enabled. So that's kind of lost its luster. It's really about, we can reduce your cost in this area by 30% or 50%, or we can increase the speed of this, or we can, help you convert this many more leads, or these kind of things. And so today, I think it's a lot more interesting if it's about a business claim, not like we have AI. I don't think we have AI is at all compelling to anybody anymore.
Yeah. I almost find it's got, back in the day, tech-enabled solutions or tech-enabled platforms, to be complementary to service, professional services providers. That was sort of the buzzword. And now it's like, well, okay, but what's the bottom line? Like, what's your unique value proposition? So I guess a take home for me, as a buyer of AI is cut to the chase and tell me how your solution improves our bottom line, top line, resource investments, etc. But don't give me half-baked ideas. Give me sort of the full rundown of how this would work. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from you, Scott, so far from what I'm digesting.
Yeah, I mean, we live, Alex, you and I, we live in the market research space, right? So we're doing research, Shapiro and Raj here, we're doing a lot of research for businesses. And so saying that you've got, an AI solution isn't interesting to me. Saying that you can cut the time I spend looking through interview transcripts by 70%. Okay, that's interesting to me. Or telling me that you can find, insights that are easily missed in a bunch of transcripts. That's interesting to me. Telling me that like I can get to the insights and the findings faster, 50% faster or whatever, right? Those are things that are interesting to me. You never have to use the word AI. I mean, it's not that you can't use the word AI, but if you say like, we've got a qualitative AI solution, you haven't told me what the benefits are.
Right.
And then you couple that with what you see on the left here, where people are saying they're getting 3 to 4 messages a day, or they're getting anywhere from 10 to 50 emails a week. You just delete all of them. You just delete literally all of them, because unless one, has just the right word and just the right spot to trigger your own little neural network, you just don't have enough time to investigate even a tenth of the things that are showing up. And so if you're a vendor selling AI powered solutions, just like realize this is the sea you're swimming in. You are one of 10 to 50 emails that person got this week, and they got that many emails the week before, and they're going to get that many emails next week. So that's just the sea you're swimming in when you're doing email marketing around your solution.
Yeah, it's a very common challenge I think we all face. I popped the question. I'm curious to hear what folks say. On average, how many AI sales emails are you getting on a weekly basis? Drop your number, and it'll be interesting to share.
Nice. So, so the answer is a little bit back to the basics, right? The answer may be email's not the way. An informative webinar might be the way. Doing, demos at conferences, doing a lot of other things that are kind of higher touch. But if you really do feel like you've got a solution and it's a compelling solution, people have to see this stuff to believe it. That's another thing that's really interesting about AI, is that people have to sort of see it in action with their own eyes. A lot of times it's hard to explain what it's doing or why it's better, but when
Mm,
people see it or people can get their hands on it, a lot of times that's where the light bulbs go off. We had a number of people saying um, they literally look at zero of the solutions they get emailed. Like that is simply not a channel they use to find
mm,
AI solutions. They find, word of mouth. They ask what other people are using. Um, they hear a solution mentioned by peers 3 or 4 or 5 times.
mm.
Uh, you know, they saw it somewhere. And so they got, maybe they got invited to a webinar that was on an interesting topic.
Right.
Um, and
Mm,
so, just keep that in mind as AI vendors. I mean, you know what the conversion rates are of your emails and things like that.
yeah.
So maybe you're getting success, but from the people we talked to, a number of people literally said zero. I
Right.
look at zero
Right.
of those.
Yeah. And for me, I think, and this hopefully sort of resonates with AI solution providers, I tend to want to see something in action. And that for me typically resonates the most if it is at a conference. It could be a webinar, of course, but something where I can see my peers utilizing your solutions with a use case that directly aligns with the workflows, the use cases, the operations of our business. So the more targeted and niche a conference can be, then whoever is the case study or the co-presenter to your content and your thought leadership will probably resonate and align and allow for there to be um, replication of the use case from one client to another. But I think the more targeted the messaging in terms of how it's being utilized so that we get through the fluff of the more generalized case study, I think is something I was thinking about as you were describing that, Scott. Fair
Yeah,
point.
for sure. So relevant use cases, what is breaking through? So if you've got a use case, if you tell me you solve a problem that's exactly the problem that I have, that's interesting.
Exactly.
For businesses like me, and this is just marketing 101, right? With case studies. People want to see a case study in their industry of a similar kind of company with similar problems. It's back to all of that kind of stuff. Partners, to the extent that organizations are using partners to bring them solutions, they expect partners to have done some of that vetting and curation. And so by the time a
Mm,
partner comes in with a solution, it's probably met a certain bar because their reputation as a trusted advisor is on the line to some degree.
mhm.
And industry peers and opinions. What are other people using? That kind of social proof of, oh, a company that's like mine is using this solution and things like that. So a
Mhm.
lot of the stuff that is in general worked, still does work, but it's really about establishing the proof, establishing the customer evidence,
Yeah.
understanding the business, speaking to the business challenges and use cases.
Mhm.
Um, so as we get into this, there's a little bit of um, difference starting to show up between, say, enterprise
Mm,
vendors and startups. Enterprise vendors, may have rushed out features that are kind of add-ons to their existing solutions. And or at the other end of the spectrum, people feel like the enterprise vendors maybe aren't as innovative and cutting edge and bringing as much magic to the market as the startups. On the other
mhm.
hand, the startups in some cases are just bringing, thinly wrapped chat GPTs. And
Mm,
so um, it isn't, it doesn't feel like they're necessarily bringing a ton of value
mm.
beyond what the underlying large language models themselves are bringing.
Mhm.
And so as we think about this, where the established vendors versus startups play, people do definitely feel like they're seeing a lot more innovation from the startups. I mean, even if we think about the chatbots that are out there right now, OpenAI is kind of a startup. I don't know, it doesn't necessarily feel quite like a startup anymore, but nobody had heard of them 4 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
so still kind of a startup. And they, by all accounts, have the best large language model there is. Uh, and so they're in this lead position. And if you look at video generation, Runway ML is really good. If you look at image generation, Midjourney is really good. If so
Mm-hmm.
whether it's Figma or whether it's, you can name Jasper, you can name like 100 companies that are small,
Mm-hmm.
and it's where people see the innovation coming from. It's where they got there early, they staked their claim, they're agile, they're moving very quickly. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what people, though, expect from the established vendors, companies like to buy from companies like them. So Fortune 500s like to buy from Fortune 500s. And there's a lot of, you know, uh, the the itties, security, reliability,
Mm-hmm.
scalability, right? All of these things that are looked for in enterprise software, and the established vendors are probably bringing a lot more of that. So you
Mm-hmm.
expect a solution from Microsoft or Google to be secure to the point where you probably don't even really need to ask about it. They
Mm-hmm.
bring the decades of credibility and trust with them that they've built from working with you all over these years. Their solutions are more likely to integrate, and that was something that came up a lot in the interviews. Was there was some
Mm-hmm.
startup, they had a whiz-bang solution, but it was going to be like a whole nother user interface that we had to have open, and people would be like switching between apps, and we really need something that integrates. We really need something that's going to surface this AI functionality in the tool
Mm-hmm.
that people are spending their time in. And established vendors are more likely to do that, if nothing else, just because the tool is part of their ecosystem. Salesforce surfaces AI capabilities. They're going to do it right in the Salesforce user interface. It's going to be integrated with Salesforce.
Right.
HubSpot, same thing. Microsoft, same thing. Google, same thing. And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they both have their places. Startups doing things that are really innovative, really groundbreaking, that nobody else has caught up with. Definitely have a place, and some of them are doing really well. And the established vendors are going to take maybe what is a whole product to a startup, and they're going to featureize pieces of that, and roll those out as features in their products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one anecdotal example, Scott, I can share just from sort of the startup category, which I appreciate, is the opportunity to help build out the features, that a solutions provider is looking for. And there's a little bit more sway when it's an early stage startup and, it's founded by someone that comes from our industry and they're looking to build something that's going to really pinpoint and solve problems. And that's sometimes easier to do, certainly with a startup and less cost intensive, but it can be time intensive and working with what could be a potential vendor, but more from a partnership perspective. So I get a lot of those inquiries from sort of the research community, Scott. I'm sure you do as well. Um,
Yeah.
so it is something that I think about can be advantageous, but also can be time intensive. So,
And we'll actually talk about that a little bit farther on. That's a preview of something vendors might want to think about
mhm.
as kind of a best practice, actually. But we'll
Yeah,
we'll get into that.
yeah, yep.
So up to this point, all we've talked about is buy. Are you buying from an enterprise vendor? Are you buying from a startup? What a lot of organizations have actually done is they've looked at these solutions and they've said, okay, what they're trying to do honestly doesn't look that hard, especially when we think about our specific data, the narrow set of use cases that are important to us,
Hmm.
the development capabilities we have in house. AI sits in this interesting spot where, for how easy the code is to write, what it can do is extremely powerful. So, I mean, if you wanted to extract skills from a resume before generative AI, like that was a hard computing problem to identify skills that could be buried anywhere across a resume. Now it's like a line of code to send a
Hmm.
resume in with a prompt, and get back a data structure of skills. And so, it's a sort of magic box that developers have available to them. And so what a lot of organizations are saying is, it might just be better to build this stuff ourselves. And a lot of them are building their own bespoke solutions in-house. And they're doing that for a few reasons. One, they're not finding it in the vendor ecosystem. Again, it maybe falls apart under the real world, because clients are all different, and yet you run into a lot of variance. It's not that hard to develop against these AIs. And the other thing too that people are thinking about is the underlying technology is changing so fast. And who knows who the winner is going to be? Is the winner going to be OpenAI? Is it going to be Microsoft? Is it going to be Google? Is it going to be Facebook open sourcing, a really powerful model? Who knows? It's too early to know who the winners are. It's too early to even know what capabilities are going to be available a year from now. And so organizations feel like if they build it themselves, they've got a ton of control over how the data is handled, the security. They have full transparency because they know how they're building it, and they've got the ability to be agile and adopt or switch to better technologies much more rapidly than if they're waiting on a vendor to kind of, take in those new technologies, build something around it, do the testing. It could be 6 months before a new groundbreaking technology shows up through a solution that you bought. Whereas if you build it yourself, you can implement that at your own speed. Now, there's a lot of drawbacks to building yourself. It's expensive. That's code that you have to maintain. That's eating up resources that could go to other things. But more than a lot of other technologies, we're seeing a lot more build instead of buy at this stage than we've seen when other kind of transformative technologies have come along. At the end of the day, the buyers are carrying a lot. They're faced with checking a ton of boxes in this sort of treacherous landscape. So is it genuinely valuable? Does it actually integrate so that it's not its own standalone island, its own separate pane of glass? Even if you buy it, they will come, not necessarily. If you build it, they will come, not necessarily. There's tremendous amounts of internal resistance around AI. To some degree, like a lot of people they don't even want to touch it. They're afraid of it. It got a lot of bad press when it first came out. Front page of the New York Times, talking about how an AI tried to get somebody to leave their wife, and the hallucinations that came out of these. So there's a lot of persisting perceptions that this is just scary, dangerous technology. And so it requires a real organizational investment to get people to use the technology that's at their fingertips. There's a lot of concerns about privacy and security, what's happening with our data. Can we use this for sensitive data? Should we not use it for sensitive data? We don't want to get locked into a vendor. We don't want to pick a startup that's out of business in 18 months. We don't want to pick a technology that's built on something that's going to be legacy in a year or two, and they're not going to move forward. And then how do we measure this? How do we measure that we're actually getting value out of this? So we spend on this, we roll it out. Is it just usage? Do we have some way of measuring cost savings, time savings? It's kind of a squishy technology. So some of these things can be a little bit challenging to do. And again, a lot of times decision makers are sitting inside of organizations and they want to bring AI to their department or their line of business, but they're doing it outside of any real top-down AI strategy in the organization. So they're also sort of left on their own to figure this out. There isn't like an AI procurement center of excellence that can really really walk them through this stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that, Scott, at our company, one of the things we did in the first half of 2023, we developed an AI task force that was across departments, across different functional units, with the sole purpose of us, let's just define what our use cases are, because there are just so many that are being thrown at the wall. Um, and let's just at least unify ourselves in what we're saying are the key priorities that we think can be enabled through AI. And so anyway, did it work out in our favor? We did some building internally, we did some buying externally. By no means are the builds perfect or the buys perfect. I think I share that sort of concept of half-baked. But what are you seeing organizations doing? I see AI officers on, job profiles, both for buyers of AI within an organization, but also, of course, from a solutions provider's perspective. Um, are you seeing a trend towards it, or perhaps just give us a future state of what you think it could look like? Or do you think AI and the purchasing decisions will sit within departments as opposed to a central AI center of excellence?
Yeah, I think the center of excellence and the expertise around these kind of solutions is important. It is important to have people in an organization, regardless of how it's structured, but their job is to enable the organization to be successful. So
Mm-hmm.
so that everybody doesn't have to figure it out on their own. In the technology space, we saw something similar happen around DevOps, where you would kind of have a DevOps center of excellence, and they would enable all the development teams to be able to do DevOps, but it's not like they did all of that for the whole company. But
Mm-hmm.
they might pick, the standard tools, the standard, ways that things are done. And yeah, we kind of see something similar happening with AI. I wouldn't say we're at the point now where it's matured to that. A lot of organizations are just
Mm-hmm.
meeting with vendors, looking at demos, making decisions, doing buying things. Um, but you do start to see those more senior AI roles, and a lot of that can be, okay, what is it that you want to accomplish? Educating about, okay, here's what you can reasonably expect AI to do today versus not do today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, here's how we'll help put a business case together around this. Here's how we'll help make the build versus buy decision. It makes a lot of sense right now to have a team of people in an organization who are really smart about that kind of stuff and can
Mm-hmm.
help mentor the different groups as you know, they're meeting with vendors and looking at individual solutions, because most people aren't AI experts, right? They don't know
Yeah.
how a large language model works, or a vector database, or, all these kind of things that are happening under the covers.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to expect.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
So an empathetic approach. So as organizations are thinking about engaging with buyers, you know, it's a balancing act to have a constant presence and be seen as a leader in the market, but vendors should be doing this in a humble way, right? It's credible. Buyers and vendors. Buyers know that we are in early days. Buyers know that vendors haven't been building solutions like these for 20 years, and they're just, it's like Microsoft Excel, where we're just, refining it around the edges a lot. Um, this is brand new. And there's so much about it that's brand new. Not only is the technology brand new, but what is the right way for a human being to interact with this technology is brand new. And there's a ton of research to be done there. So being transparent, openly acknowledging the current limitations and evolving state of AI. To your point, Alex, being collaborative. Clients are very interested in co-creating solutions with vendors at this point. They're a lot more patient with this technology because they know it's new, they know it's evolving, they know that vendors can only have so much like real experience with end customers. They're kind of throwing stuff at a wall, using it to get feedback and iterate. So customers want to be part of that. They want to pull the vendors in and say, let me show you what we're trying to do here. And then you go think of how you could enable this in a really elegant way. But here's the challenge we have. Here's the use case we have. Here's the benefit that we could
Mm,
provide. So really thinking about co-creating with your customers, show some empathy. I mean, understand that you're one of hundreds of solutions that they're getting pitched. And if you're not explaining the business problem that you solve, um, if it's just about like we have an AI X that does Y, that's not helping them out. That's
mm,
requiring too much investigation on their part. And just really think about cultivating trust. I mean, a lot of these buyers feel like they have been burned from early days of looking at solutions that were just junk, and now they're just more skeptical and they're just more guarded with their time.
mhm,
And so thinking about what you can do that's sort of real trust building exercises is really important. Few final thoughts. Nobody's just buying AI anymore, right? Nobody's saying like, I want an AI, whatever. So generic AI pitches are canceled. It's got to be about the business value. And if AI is a way of explaining how you provide this, these grand claims and are able to provide, 50% savings, 70% savings, whatever, then that's fine. But it's about the capabilities you're providing, the business problems you're solving, not the technology underneath it. Nobody's buying AI. Think also about a lot of these AI solutions, they just drop the user into a text box and a button without a ton of
mm,
guidance around what they can put in. And so the user will try to put some different prompts in that invariably like don't work because they're not what the AI was designed for. It's potentially a lot better to build some narrow solutions that work really, really well and kind of keep the user guided into what you can expect, where you can expect this to work, and not really let them stray outside of that. So that doesn't make sense for every solution, but in general, think about chipping off a use case and really nailing that use case and building out from there, rather than kind of sort of not really working at a whole bunch of stuff and leaving it
mhm,
really open-ended to where the user could, try darn near anything. And then it's easier for an AI to make something up than to say, I can't help you with that, or I don't know.
mhm,
Just because of the nature of generative AI, right? It's designed to generate an answer, and its answer is rarely on its own going to be, I don't know, or that's outside the bounds of what I can do. So
mhm,
think about that when you're building solutions. Um, Even if they buy it, really enabling customer success and usage is critical if you want them to renew, because a ton of these solutions are going to get bought. They're going to be kind of shelfware. They're not, it's not going to get a ton of use. And a year later, when it comes up from renewal, the company's going to feel like we didn't get a lot of value out of this.
mhm,
Um, and so the customer success piece of this can't be um, overstated. And then even for these companies that decide to build versus buy, are you offering something for the builders? So you've got a solution, it has a user interface. Is some of that solution available, as a module through an API? Is it the kind of
mm,
thing that builders can plug in as a module of something larger that they're building? So thinking about a developer story
mm.
for just about anything you're building um, is also important, because just because they decided to build doesn't mean you've lost if you have a compelling component.
Great proposition there, Scott.
Yeah.
And thank you, group, for sending your questions. Please do send those questions along. I sort of gave a little bit of a hint to the audience. We have about 10 minutes left. It's been a really great conversation, Scott. I think you've opened up our eyes on a number of levels. We have a mix of buyers and providers on the webinar today. I think for the buyers of technology, I think we can all say that we are not alone. I think we all share commonalities in some of the challenges. But I see them as opportunities for the providers that are here. Hopefully, with some of the insights that the interviews that Scott and the Shapiro team conducted with the Ivy Exec network um, provide a little bit of color into sort of what are potential opportunities for providers to sort of address. I love the point about collaboration as opposed to just sort of providing an out of the box solution. And so what we wanted to just mention very quickly before we go to Q&A is if there are opportunities where you're looking for some immediate insights related to your organization's, involvement in the world of AI, whether it be on the provider side or on the buyer side, Scott's your man. I will say he is a key subject matter expert in all things AI innovation. And so we just wanted to extend a special offer if anyone would like for us to partner with you in leveraging the Ivy Exec network for insights to what you're thinking about as it relates to AI, partnering with Scott and the Shapiro and Raj team to do some deeper dive research and provide you some deliverables. All of what you saw today were from a set of 10 interviews conducted by Scott and his team from Ivy Exec members, decision makers within the organization. And so we'd be happy to explore that with you. We'll reduce our costs to those that have attended the webinar. Simply just reach out to us. We'll have our contact information on the following slide. And with that, we'll go into the Q&A. A couple questions that came up, Scott, if you don't mind just switching over to the next slide there. You'll find our contact info here, so reach out with any questions. Certainly reach out to Scott or myself if you have a request to have access to the PowerPoint presentation. We're happy to share that with you as well, along with additional details about our research offer. The question of sort of vetting and validating a solutions provider, it came from someone that happens to be in the research industry, I believe, that's in attendance here, Scott. Any specific principles, philosophies, approaches that buyers and solution providers should think about as they look to talk about, validity and integrity, since it's such an important topic in the world of AI?
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of testing, I guess. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question exactly. So if I'm not, feel free to rephrase it in the chat. But to the extent that you're using these solutions, there's low risk and high risk use cases for AI. So a low risk use case is if you're collaborating with AI to write a discussion guide and it's giving you suggestions, you can take it or leave it, right? You can look at the questions it comes up with and things like that, and you can say, oh, that's a really good one, and these 6 other ones are really dumb. When you're asking AI to look at transcripts or mind research or those kind of things, it's a lot higher risk because if you have to go check its work, then you haven't really saved yourself a lot of time. And so in those cases, early on, initially, you may need to check its work. You may need to go back to the source where it's getting its information and see if it's really in there. But it also comes from, we built a lot of these solutions ourselves. Some of them are internal, some of them are customer facing. But a key is, does the solution really show its work? Does it show where it got the data from? Is it connecting it back to data points that you can easily investigate yourself and see if you would make those own inferences and connections from those data points is probably one of the best design principles of AI to kind of help prove its trustworthiness and prove that it's not misinterpreting and going off in a direction that just isn't accurate and valid.
Yeah, that's our North Star as well, Scott. When we think about solutions providers that have AI enablement, we always ask the question, can you point me to the actual source where this can almost be sort of, originated verbatim? And that can, of course, vary from one use case to another, but that is something that we sort of use as a guidepost. This might be early days, Scott, but do you see a world where we're in the early days of it, but maybe in the future state where solutions providers have sort of that official stamp of approval, some sort of certification, authentication? I don't know if we're in that world already, perhaps. Are you seeing organizations touting that, hey, we've gotten that ISO certification I'm thinking about, or some sort of, compliance, standard that's been met? Or do you see that coming down the pipeline?
I don't know how far down the solution ladder it will get. You see it at the large language model level today. So there are different
Mm,
benchmarks they'll run. There's different tests they'll run. There's things like a needle in a haystack test. So if you ask it, if you put in 50 pages of text and you ask it to retrieve a specific sentence, can it do it verbatim, and do that kind of thing accurately? So for the large
mm,
language models themselves, we're seeing a lot of that kind of testing happen. And it's voluntary, but everybody wants to show how they score on the benchmarks when they come out with a new version of their large language model. I haven't seen it move down into the solutions themselves, but that would be very interesting, um, to have kind of a third party attestation or a test suite or things like that. It's a little tricky because solutions might not all do the same thing. They might not all be just searching transcripts or something like that.
right.
But some of those principles could probably be applied.
Yeah, yeah, that's a fair point. And when it comes to sort of the landscape of AI solutions that are out there, Scott, do you have a sense of, is there a heavier proportion of providers that are focused more on risk mitigation, or higher proportion tied to value creation and new revenue, back end, front
I
end, like how does that look in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, right now I think a lot of it's on value creation. It's on the
Hmm.
promise of AI, normally good, cheap, fast, pick two.
Hmm.
AI is one of these technologies that can really make things better and cheaper and faster. And so people are either looking for being able to get more done in less time, or they're looking at AI as there's all this stuff I wish I could have done on a research project. I just never would have had time to do. There's all these threads I wish I had time to investigate that, you run out of calendar, you run out of budget. And so a lot of it, I think, is on the value creation side, doing things better, cheaper, faster, all three of those,
Hmm.
than on the missed mitigation side. The thing holding it back, though, is definitely if I can't trust this, I can't use this. Just period,
Right.
end of story.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. And then again, sort of looking at this at a macro level, Scott, what sectors, industries do you feel like AI solutions providers have penetrated really well comparative to other sectors? And where are there opportunities for hockey stick growth if you're a solutions provider? What sectors seem to have not yet been, penetrated, if you will?
Yeah. Some of it's more role based, like AI in marketing has definitely taken off. I don't know of a lot of,
Role based.
you know, marketing departments that aren't, using
Yeah.
AI to at least some degree at this point. Legal is another one. I mean, the newest AI has been around for 50 years, but the AI that we're really talking about today is this generative AI, large language
Yeah.
models.
Yeah.
And it's the first time we've had AI that's actually kind of good at text. We've sort of pretended to with natural language processing and things like that before, but this is the
Hmm.
first technology that is just really human level at text. So anybody who's
Yeah.
dealing with a lot of text, whether it's HR, legal, or marketing, or those kind of roles. And then in terms of industries, it's kind of, you just think about tech adoption in general. So the
Mm.
tech industry is going to be an early adopter of a lot of tech stuff.
Right.
Healthcare, financial services are going to be a little slower. Heavily
Mm.
regulated industries are going to be slower to adopt this kind of technology.
Yeah.
That said, you know, Google is doing some very interesting things around, protein folding and drug discovery and things like
Hmm.
that with the pharmaceutical space. So in
Yeah.
all of these different industries, there's little niches and little pockets where
Yeah.
AI is just such an enormous advantage, and there isn't really, a safety concern. I mean, if it's generating candidate molecules, well, you're generating you're just generating candidate molecules, faster, better, cheaper than you could have a different way,
Right.
but you still have to do all the testing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And go through
so
whatever, FDA, requirements
yeah,
to get it to
yeah,
market.
exactly,
Um,
the decade to bring it to market.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So there's little pockets everywhere, but in general, the less regulated industries and also mid-market, smaller organizations can move faster with AI than large enterprises
Yeah.
who really just kind of lock things down, and their AI governance is going to take 18 months
Right.
to, really put a plan around something.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're right at time, Scott. So I could ask a ton more questions, whether they be from the audience or from my head. But we're gonna let everyone go. We appreciate the time, and as always, Scott, it's a lot of fun when we get together. We just have about 100 or so folks listening in on a conversation every so often, which is
All right.
great. So we'd love to stay in touch. Please reach out to us by email, by LinkedIn. Send us your questions. Shoot us a note if you're interested in either the PowerPoint or if you'd like for something that might be turnkey in a research solution, whether you're a buyer of AI or a seller. We look forward to hearing from you. And Scott, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to maybe do another one of these days
Yeah,
if uh like that.
if people have topics they want to suggest too, shoot those
Yeah,
over an email. I mean, this one
yeah.
came up a lot of it because Alex and I were just lamenting like all the solutions we were getting pitched and how little time we had. And so we said, I bet there's something here. I bet we're not the only ones. And so
Yeah,
we set out to investigate it. And, sure
yeah.
enough.
Sure enough, got some really cool insights. Well, appreciate the time, Scott, again, and thank you everyone for attending. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. Be well, everybody.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye.